حميم وظل من يحموم لا بارد ولا كريم إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك مترفين وكانوا يصرون على الحنث العظيم وكانوا يقولون أإذا متنا وكنا ترابا وعظاما أإنا لمبعوثون أو آباؤنا الأولون قل إن الأولين والآخرين لمجموعون إلى ميقات يوم معلوم ثم إنكم أيها الضالون المكذبون لآكلون من شجر من زقوم فمالئون منها البطون فشاربون عليه من الحميم فشاربون شرب الهيم هذا نزلهم يوم الدين نحن خلقناكم فلولا تصدقون أفرأيتم ما تمنون أأنتم تخلقونه أم نحن الخالقون نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين على أن نبدل أمثالكم وننشئكم فيما لا تعلمون ولقد علمتم النشأة الأولى فلولا تذكرون أفرأيتم ما تحرثون أأنتم تزرعونه أم نحن الزارعون لو نشاء لجعلناه حطاما فظلتم تفكهون إنا لمغرمون بل نحن محرومون أفرأيتم الماء الذي تشربون أأنتم أنزلتموه من المزن أم نحن المنزلون لو نشاء جعلناه أجاجا فلولا تشكرون أفرأيتم النار التي تورون أأنتم أنشأتم شجرتها أم نحن المنشئون نحن جعلناها تذكرة ومتاعا للمقوين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم فلا أقسم بمواقع النجوم وإنه لقسم لو تعلمون عظيم إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين أفبهذا الحديث أنتم مدهنون وتجعلون رزقكم أنكم تكذبون فلولا إذا بلغت الحلقوم وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون ونحن أقرب إليه منكم ولكن لا تبصرون فلولا إن كنتم غير مدينين ترجعونها إن كنتم صادقين فأما إن كان من المقربين فروح وريحان وجنة نعيم وأما إن كان من أصحاب اليمين فسلام لك من أصحاب اليمين وأما إن كان من المكذبين الضالين فنزل من حميم وتصلية جحيم إن هذا لهو حق اليقين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم صدق الله العلي العظيم. الفاتحة.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. يا أبا القاسم، يا رسول الله، يا إمام الرحمة، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا الحسن، يا أمير المؤمنين، يا علي بن أبي طالب، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا فاطمة الزهراء، يا بنت محمد، يا قرة عين الرسول، يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهة عند الله اشفعي لنا. يا أبا محمد، يا حسن بن علي، أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا عبد الله، يا حسين بن علي، أيها الشهيد بكربلاء يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها اشفع لنا. يا أبا الحسن، يا علي بن الحسين، يا زين العابدين يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا جعفر، يا محمد بن علي، أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهان يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد أيها الهادي النقي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهان يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي العسكري يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا يا وسي الحسن والخلف الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهان عند الله اشفع لنا جميعا يا وجيهان حاجات يا سادتي وموالي، إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله، وتوسلت بكم إلى الله واستشفعت بكم إلى الله، فاشفعوا لي عند الله واستنقذوني من ذنوبي عند الله، فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله، وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله، فكونوا عند الله رجائي يا سادتي يا أولياء الله. صلى الله عليهم أجمعين، ولعن الله أعداء الله ظالميهم من الأولين والآخرين، آمين رب العالمين. سورة الفاتحة.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا ولي الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا حجة الله. اللهم صل على محمد. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل. حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. وأن عليا ولي الله وأن عليا حجة الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. حي على خير عمل. حي على خير عمل. قد قامت الصلاة. قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصلي لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سميع له من حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله ربنا الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سميع له لمن حمد الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سميع له لمن حمد الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف الله أكبر بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليكم الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على وعجل فرجهم لا إله إلا الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. اللهم أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وأن عليا ولي الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع له لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد عجل فرجهم. رب اجعل لي مقيم الصلاة ومن ذريته ربنا وتقبل دعاء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد عجل فرجهم. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع له لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله ربي. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد عجل فرجهم. سمع على من حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. يا من له الدنيا والآخرة ارحم من ليس له الدنيا والآخرة. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله وخير الأسماء الحسنى لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. لا إله إلا الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. لاشے پہ زینب رو کے پکاری بھیا ہمارا کوئی نہیں. خیمے جلے اور سجاد قیدی کفنی تمہارا کوئی نہیں. ناشے پہ زینب رو کے پکاری بھیا ہمارا کوئی نہیں. دیکھو اے بھائی میں زہرا کی جائی لاشے پہ آئی ہوں بے پردہ ہو کر. مارا گیا ہے عباس غازی قاسم دلہارا کوئی نہیں. لاشے پہ زینب رو کے پکاری بھیا ہمارا کوئی نہیں. بے کس یتیموں کا قافلہ بائی تو ہی بتا دے کہاں لے کے جاؤں. لاشیں سنبھالوں یا کنبے کو دیکھوں غم کا کنارہ کوئی نہیں. لاشیں پہ زینب رو کے پکاری بھیا ہمارا کوئی نہیں. ویرا ہے خیمہ خالی ہے جھولا تشنہ سکینہ کے کس کو دیکھوں. گر کر ہوئی چور بے آس بیٹی اب تو سہارا کوئی نہیں. لاشے پہ زینب رو کے پکاری بھیا ہمارا کوئی نہیں. کریل جواں کی میت ہے آئی کہتی ہے لیلا اے میرے اکبر کس کی نظر تم کو کھا گئی ہے میرا سہارا کوئی نہیں. لاشے پہ زینب رو کے پکاری بھیا ہمارا کوئی نہیں. بولی یہ رو کے زہرا کی جائی کرب و بلا میں گر لٹ گیا ہے. مارا گیا ہے اب میرا بھائی وارث ہمارا کوئی نہیں. لاشے پہ زینب رو کے پکاری بھیا ہمارا کوئی نہیں. کہتی تھی کبرا اے میرے دلہا کس کی سہارے اب میں جیوں گی. حیف ہے جینا تم جو نہیں ہو باپ نہ بھائی کوئی نہیں. لاشے پہ زینب رو کے پکاری بھیا ہمارا کوئی نہیں. بولی اے زینب اونو محمد اٹھو اے پیارو آئی ہے مادر باتیں تو کر لو بولو اے پیارو غم کا کنارہ کوئی نہیں. لاشے پہ زینب رو کے پکاری بھیا ہمارا کوئی نہیں. کرب و بلا میں ہم کو بھلانا करबो बला में हमको बुलाना, आके वहाँ हम पढ़ ले ज़ियारत। मेरी तमन्ना आऊँ वहाँ में, इसके सिवा कोई आरज़ू नहीं। लाशे पे ज़ैनब रोके पुकारी, भैया हमारा कोई नहीं। खैमे जले और सज्जाद के दी, कफनी तुम्हारा कोई नहीं। पर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु सूरत मुबारकातुल फातिहा।
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Sayyid Hassan Rizvi, respected elders, dearest brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum, Jameel wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all marhumin listed on the screen, as well as all other marhumin. Suratul Mubarakatul Fatiha. Dua Shifai Maries is requested for all those in need here and elsewhere, as well as those listed on the screen. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. 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 Ya Allah, let us now invite Sayyid Hassan Rizvi to please come forward for tonight's majlis by Muhammad wa Muhammad salawat.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة بعد الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد محمد. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، خاتم النبيين، شفيع المذنبين، رحمة للعالمين، سيدنا والنبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight, we are commemorating the Shahadah of our fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Baqir al-Ulum al-Nabiyyin alayhi salatu wa salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. And his Shahadah, according to most reports, coincides with the 7th of Dhul Hijjah. Most of us, when we discuss the fada'il of this Imam, as well as his son, the 6th Imam, we talk about them as those who spread knowledge, those who taught and increased the amount of depth and breadth of knowledge of the Muslims, both Shia and Sunni, who were around them at that time. And normally historians talk about how relative to the other A'immah, although they were still living among Zalimeen, the Khulafa of their time were still Zalimeen, but because of internal conflicts and other socio-political issues, the 5th, 6th, both of them, they had a little bit more relative freedom to be able to go and teach. So normally when we speak about the fada'il of those two Imams, especially the 5th Imam, we talk about how they paved the way and that he was a great teacher and he taught in many different aspects and respects. So we usually go up and speak about that kind of fada'il, right? Him as a teacher and what kind of sciences he imparted. But a lot of times we neglect that in the idea of ta'aleem and ta'allum. In terms of education, it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. That, yes, the fada'il lies on, of course, the teacher, but at the same time, if the student can't match their teacher, if the people who are sitting there at the feet of their teacher, if they can't handle what's being given to them, then it doesn't matter what kind of teacher you have. So what I wanted to focus on tonight is that aspect as well, something that the Imam himself did address in many of the riwayat of the 5th and 6th Imam, and even later Imams as well. They talk and focus on some of the qualities of their own students, يعني the Shi'as that are required. Because as we said, in order for the Imam to be able to split and open up the pathways of knowledge, then there has to be the proper recipients there. You have to be able to receive that knowledge from him. And even for us right now, if we want to take examples from any of the A'immah, especially the 5th and 6th Imams, in order to do that, we need to know what qualities as a student of the Ahlul Bayt, as a student of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, what qualities do I need to have? Have they laid down specific positive and negative qualities for you and I to understand so that we know what the qualities of a true student and a true Shia of the Ahlul Bayt would look like? So we'll start with the first hadith, inshallah, if you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So in this first one, our 5th Imam alayhi salam divides the Shi'as into 3 separate groups. He's reported to have said, Shi'atuna thalathatu asnaf, that our Shi'as, which now by making this category, he's talking about a specific type of group, right? He's saying our Shi'as. So he's already talking, cutting out just the regular group of Muslims, or even just the muhibbeen of Ahlul Bayt, right? From other narrations, we know that somebody can love the Ahlul Bayt, but they may not be a Shia necessarily. So already the Imam is talking about a specific exclusive group of Shias, right? The close ones that should be able to benefit from him. Even there, the Imam wants to let us know that there's 3 categories and there's 3 groups amongst the Shia. Sinfun ya'kuluna nas bina. The first group are those who, literally, this category are those who, by utilizing us or through us, literally the hadith saying that they eat people. Now, what does that mean? This first category, according to the ulama, when they explain this, they say that through us, they end up using us and utilizing us just for their worldly desires. Meaning the Ahlul Bayt just become a source of income from them. And that's it. Now, you might be surprised when they say, okay, the Imam is not talking about general Muslims. He's not talking about the lovers of Ahlul Bayt. He's talking about our Shias. So we would assume that, he's going to talk about positive traits. But even here, even in this time, the Imam is saying, look, even in my time, these Shias who are trying to follow and listen to my commands, even one group of them is still only utilizing the message and the teachings of us, the Ahlul Bayt, just for their own worldly needs and desires. That's it. They trick people, they abuse people, and they use our names for that. Now, there's a historical aspect to it, and then there's a kind of contemporary aspect to it. Right? The historical one is that during that time, as we said, without going into the full details of what was happening in the Umayyad Empire at that point, there was a lot of internal conflict. And many of the khulafa of that time, some of them, like we said, relatively they were a bit better. They were still zalimeen. They were still stealing funds from people. They didn't deserve to be there, but some of them were better than others, right? But when they were dealing with other individuals, when they saw that there was, different groups of Muslims to be dealt with, in Shias and things like that, in the same way as other khulafa, they said, look, I have to try, as a khalifa, my best to make sure all of these groups of individuals are coming towards me. When we see later with the Abbasids, they took a very direct approach, right? They said, okay, let me just take the Imams, let me pretend like they'll be the next Khalifa, and I'll keep them near me. The Umayyads and the early Abbasids didn't use these sort of methods. They had different types of methods. Usually it was fear tactics or buying people out, bribery, these kinds of things. So even amongst that, some of the speakers and ulama of that time, they, by our, let's say, categorization, we may consider them Shias, Shia ulama. But we see that the way that they were approaching, the way that they would teach, the way that they would, interact with the other Shias and the other Muslims, their only concern was to be able to benefit monetarily. Meaning their, as we say, daily bread, the rizq. That's what they used the Ahlul Bayt for. So when they would go around, when they would see that, okay, there's some Shias over here, let me put on the sort of Shia garb. Let me talk like a Shia or act like a Shia. Spread their information and teach that knowledge from the Ahlul Bayt, just because these individuals, the quote-unquote wealthy ones, they'll be able to benefit me. And unfortunately, in a modern day context, we still have individuals like that, where the only reason that they end up attaching themselves to the Ahlul Bayt, the only reason that they mention things from the points from the Ahlul Bayt, is so that they can get a paycheck, and that's it. Now, sometimes we see this among ulama or pseudo-ulama, but it's very rare, I would say. I don't think it's a majority. Although some speakers would say that there's some mafia going around just looking out to gain money. I don't think that exists. More often than not, you'll find this more in academia. Now, why is that? You see, the problem is in academia, the idea is you cannot get published, you can't have a name unless you're pushing some idea out there. I don't want to give names, but I think most of us know the various controversies that have taken place over the years amongst these, doctors, right? These individuals who have PhDs in Islamic studies or Shi'i studies, things like that. And the problem is that when they come out with their ideas, right? Articles, papers, books, whatever it is, they end up being very controversial to, individuals like you and I, because it doesn't follow the orthodox stuff that you and I are used to. Now, they might have a methodology, they might be resourcing and sourcing the Ahlul Bayt, the Ahadith, and the Quran, and things like that. But normally what happens in academia, and unless somebody's involved in academia, they wouldn't know this. But in the academic world, usually the advisors, they tell their students, the ones who are writing these theses and things like that, if you want to get published, if you want people to fund your research, you need to publish something that's controversial, that's different, that's going to push buttons. And that's the problem. Ask anybody who's in the academic world, especially when it comes to Islamic studies. They are told that, you can't just push something that's orthodox. So look, that's for those guys in the seminaries. That's not for you and I. You need to publish something that'll push buttons and get people upset. Push a new theory out, even if you don't have strong evidence for it. Push it out there because, that's how you'll get published. Now, there's obviously conspiracy theories about why that happens. I'll save that for another lecture. And, for those who know, I think they know, right? These kind of ideas are pushed out there for a reason. And if you look at the types of individuals, where the money comes from these, these chairs or these individuals who are involved in these academic circles, I think it's very clear the individuals who are pushing this stuff out, what their agenda is. But again, I'll let you, individuals, you can figure it out for yourself. So the first group, even though they're Shi'as, the only way they utilize the Ahlul Bayt is just for their monetary and physical dunyawi benefit. What's the second group? Please recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So this first group is just looking to benefit and abuse the name of the Ahlul Bayt, even though they're actually Shias. Second group, وَصِنْفٌ كَالزُّجَّاجِ يَنُومٌ. This second category of Shias, now they're not as bad as the first, so, although it's arguable if they're better or worse, but the Imam is saying that they're like glass or like crystal, yanum, that reflect or reveal or kind of illuminate. You might say, oh, that sounds good, right? Like, well, we need to understand the context of what the Imam is saying. This is not actually praise here. So what do the ulama say when they're explaining this hadith? They say, look, the first group were individuals who weren't benefiting properly from the Ahlul Bayt, right? Because the only benefit they got was dunyawi perspective, right? They just learned stuff from the Ahlul Bayt so that they can get more money. That was it. This second group, now they might have had good intentions, or you and I, we have good intentions. We're learning these secrets from the Ahlul Bayt and all the different teachings. But the problem is that, the Imam's saying, some of these Shias are like glass, and that they reflect and they reveal. And that's not a good thing. You see, glass, obviously, we know that whatever comes in or out, you'll see everything that's inside. It doesn't hide anything, and it's also brittle and weak. right? You drop it, you touch it a little bit, it'll crack or break. He said this is the problem with the second group of Shias in two different perspectives. One is in the fact of them being like glass, where they're weak and they're fragile. They might learn a lot of different things. They know all their ahkam, they know all their fiqh. They know a lot of different points about history. They know a lot of their aqa'id very well. So they know all this information. But because they don't have a lot of deep information, they don't have a lot of depth, and they don't have a lot of breadth to their information as well, the minute someone comes, either from inside or outside, and they tap on the Shia a little bit, right? They tap that glass a little bit, then they start to break, they start to crack, and then eventually they might shatter, right? They're weak like glass. So a person, an enemy, or somebody who wants to take advantage, they can see through you and through us like glass. They're like, I know exactly what your weakness is, so I'll break you. I know that your weakness happens to be that maybe your history is not strong, so hey, let me quote some history that you don't know so that your aqidah becomes weaker. Oh, did you know that some of your imams did X, Y, Z? Oh, you didn't know that, did you? Did you know that in some of your classical books, the ulama of the past, they had this view about women or about children, etc., etc.? Did you know that? You might say, I didn't know that. See, they found your crack, and now they're hitting it a little bit more and more. You might have a decent establishment in your faith, but somebody else will see through you, they'll see these cracks, and they'll start to break it little by little. Or the other side, right? So this is the brittle nature, fragile nature of a Shia. The other way the Imam is explaining is the second sifa, yanum. That you, not only that people can see within you, but everything that's within you, you also reveal out as well. And you might say, isn't that good to share, right? This is the, to put it like this, we think that knowledge and education should be for everybody. Right? If we learn something, we want to share with everybody. Don't we say there's a zakat for ilm? You have to teach everybody. Anytime you learn information, go and pass it on. But you see, this does not follow the seed of the Ahlul Bayt. And if you look in the past, many individuals, I'll give one example, and I believe this was from the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. There's one story, and I'm just going to paraphrase it quickly. It's a big story, but I'll just share a little bit of it. See, the Imam, one of his Shias once came to him, and they complained. They said, that one of our close Shias, someone that we know in Sham, right, where Muawiyah was still ruling there, he was attacked and beaten just for having love for you. So the Imam said, how did something like this take place? He said, well, I traveled to Sham, and I met with our fellow Shia over there, and I was discussing things. And I went out in the open, and I was talking about different things out in the open. And when people around there, they found out that, our mutual friend or Shia, he was a follower of you, they went out and they, attacked him for his beliefs. So the Imam responds to this individual. He said, so you went out and were publicly discussing our asrar and secrets. And you were publicly going around telling people that you're a Shia and things like this. He said, yes. He said, so then the blame does not go on Muawiyah and the Zalimeen. The blame comes on you. He said, we have advised you and told you that our asrar, our secrets need to be kept hidden. You need to be wise. You need to be hakim when you're going around. You can't just spread everything everywhere. This is not the way of a Shia. Now somebody might argue, they said, okay, well, that's because he was in Sham, right? Now it's different. I said, is it different right now? Nowadays, if, some of the ahkam of Shias, of the Ahlul Bayt, if you tell that to another Shia, they might, leave Islam all of a sudden. Just simple fiqh rulings, right? You tell them that this is the ruling, and I mean, this has actually happened. I have a friend of one of my friends from the Hawza. They were having a discussion about the rulings of irtidad, apostasy. And, this individual, like many others, they had a question, right? Some of us have, I think, heard what the rulings might be. So he was telling my friend, again, a Hawza student, he said, I want to sit down with you and have a conversation about this ruling. I said, okay, sure, let's meet. So, they sat down at Tim Hortons because they were Canadian. That's why they sat there. They sat down there, this is how this person started the conversation. He said, look, I know what I've heard. He's like, I've heard that the fatwa, the ruling is if somebody leaves Islam, they're supposed to be killed. He said, look, I'm telling you right away, this guy's barely had like 2 sips of the coffee. He said, if that's the ruling, then I'm done with Islam and I'm going to leave. Now, my friend was in an awkward position. Like, what was he going to tell this individual? He's like, you put me in. That's what he said. He said, what do you want me to do? He's like, if I give you an answer, which is what you kind of said right now, if I tell you that, you're going to leave Islam, and then I'm going to be kind of the reason that you're not a Muslim anymore. He's like, what am I supposed to do if you've shut yourself off to that? And again, I'm not here to talk about what the ruling happens to be. It's, I think, a longer conversation. But the point is, some people, they're so closed-minded. They've shut their hearts off that even if you have a small discussion about the rulings, again, talk about, again, right now, post-Roe v. Wade, when people hear the rulings of the Maraji, the vast majority of them about what the rulings are, whether it's post-ensoulment 4 months or after 4 months, some people are like, I just can't believe it. That doesn't sound right. Like, look, whether it sounds right or not, we can't do anything about that. But these are the fatwa. I said, well, then I don't know if I can be a Shia anymore. Well, okay, I don't know what to tell you then. If these rulings, if you believe that these rulings are coming from Allah, they're being passed on through the Ahlul Bayt to our Maraji and ulama, and they're coming to you, and you can't handle that, well, then that means you're brittle and fragile like glass. At the same point, maybe we don't need to always go around and to just blast everybody and hit them with fatwa all the time too. Sometimes, we have to teach people the ahkam. I don't deny that. But there are some ahkam, given the socio-political, situation that we're living in right now, cancel culture and people being woke, although the woke people are the ones who are probably asleep the most. Because you shake them and wake them up, they're the ones who freak out the most, right? A little bit and they're all triggered all of a sudden. Right? So, okay, we have to learn that, let's take it step by step. Let's believe in God first. Then after God, we'll go to His justice. Then after that, we'll go to the prophets and the Quran, small things. Then maybe we'll start talking about some of these more controversial things. Because normally, the reason somebody can't handle the fiqh and the ahkam and the usul ad-din, the furu' ad-din, the reason they have problems there is because we've said before, it's the usul ad-din that's an issue. If you trust in Allah, then there won't be an issue with any ahkam or fiqh ruling that we come across, right? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, we don't want to be like glass either. We don't want people to see everything within us, so they see our weaknesses, nor do we want to reveal everything all the time. Right? Don't be extreme saying, no, Islam is haqq, so I'm going to spread it everywhere all the time. No, that's not the case. Just because something is there, you have to be wise enough to know what is the right time and the right place. Is this the right audience? Do I have this discussion here or not? Now, the third category. You're like, okay, these are two terrible categories. Like, is the Imam actually going to praise Shias or not? Yes, the third category, we actually got some good Shias finally, don't worry. وَصِنْفٌ كَالذَّهَبِ الْأَحْمَرِ. And the third category of Shias are like red gold. كُلَّمَا ادْخُلِ النَّارِ ازْدَادَ جَوْدَةً. So this third category of Shias are like red gold. Whenever they are entered and put into fire, then they increase in their quality, they increase in their beauty, and they increase in their greatness. I think many of us have heard these analogies from the Ahlul Bayt before, right? Our Shias are the ones, they're like gold, or they're like this, like that. When they're tested, they become stronger, they become braver, they become better. So we've heard these things before. What's interesting is in this one, the Imam refers to it not just as gold, but as red gold. Now, I know many of you who are into your jewelry, you've heard of white gold and rose gold and all these other things, right? Usually, the only time people mention gold is it's men asking if they're allowed to wear white gold or not. That's the only time people care, right? And no, you can't. You can't wear it. But you're like, okay, has anybody actually heard of red gold before? So with gold, again, I'm not into metallic or all this stuff, but the basic stuff is this. Pure gold, normally, you're not going to really find anywhere. Normally, especially when it's turned into jewelry. When jewelry is made from gold, typically, there's things that are added in, like copper or iron or zinc or different types of elements are added so that it becomes somewhat pliable, and then it becomes hardened after that, so you can actually wear it as a piece. It's very rare for somebody to actually wear pure gold in its purest form. It's way too soft for that to happen. So normally something needs to be added in. When those different things become added in, like copper, zinc, iron, whatever it is, that ends up changing the color of the gold that you have. So sometimes it's rose, sometimes it's white, yellow gold, etc. And it all depends on the level and the amount, the percentage of these different elements that come in. So one can imagine, when there's a high amount of copper, nearly 50% copper, sometimes 75% copper that comes in, this is where it starts to take on more of a reddish, brownish hue. Yeah, any red gold here. And in the Middle East, right, in the sort of ancient era, so in Greece and Rome, and especially in the Arab area, this was actually the normal type of gold that they would find there. So the amount of copper or the other impurities that would come in there would actually turn this gold into red. Now, I don't know why I mentioned all that. I don't know what it has to do with the discussion. I figured, let me just tell you anyway. I wanted to look at it, see if it actually had anything to do with the hadith. I don't know if it does necessarily. But the point still stands no matter what type of gold we're talking about. We know that when gold is there, while it's there in its initial state, the whole idea is that you can change its shape. Either when it's weak like that, either you can shape it into something beautiful, or it can break or melt or be destroyed, right? I said the analogy is very obvious, that we all have to deal, if we're real Shi'as, we have to be faced with bala. That's the only way we're going to grow. So Allah, people always ask this question, why does God do this to me? Why isn't my life perfect? I'm a Shia, I want to live a good life. I said, okay, Allah wants you to be the best type of gold possible. In order for you to really be gold and to really be strong, you have to be a little malleable. You're going to have to be burnt a little bit. You have to go through trials. That's the only way to actually improve yourself and to become hardened. And you see people, it's obvious. We all know this. The minute and any time we go through these trials, if our aql is there, if our tawakkul is there, if the tawassul is being employed as well too, all these tools that the Ahlul Bayt have taught us, if all of that is there, then any time we go through these difficulties, maybe in the beginning, we were kind of questioning. Then we think about it a little bit more. And we ponder, and we question. We learn, we say, look, God has to have some goodness there. God can only do what's best for me. Whenever God does something to me, it's only so that I can grow in my kamal and my perfection. So then a person thinks about that, they contemplate, they pray, they make dua, they go through all this, they research, they ask people for advice, they go through all this, and at the end they become stronger through it. Right? Just like this. They increase in their quality. So that the next time they go through these difficulties, it means nothing to them. And this also, I want to take it back to the idea of the Imam being this, Baquir al-ulum, the one who's splitting open knowledge. So how does this relate in terms of education? Let's talk about that. If you can recite it, salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The way that a lot of people want to be taught or educated is using a very, let's say, outdated form of pedagogy. Pedagogy meaning the sort of philosophy or method of learning, right? So classically, the way that many individuals, countries, and societies would teach people, especially children, is that they say, look, the child is just like an empty box or a bank or whatever. All we do is take information and just shove it down and then close the lid so that it stays within them. That's it. So that sort of pedagogy is this. Here's information. Take it. Don't ask questions. Memorize it. After you've memorized it, we're going to give you a test. You just regurgitate and spit that information back out. If you do that, then that means you know your stuff, and that's it. This was the way that intellectuals would be judged. Hey, how much information, what kind of data bank are you? Even some places in schools right now, they use the same sort of outdated method of rote memorization. Now, look, any person can memorize all these facts. It doesn't mean that they've actually changed internally. It doesn't mean that they're a wise individual. Right? They've actually done these studies too where they test, for example, people who have PhDs in philosophy or ethics and morality, things like this. And they ask, do these people actually become more moral or less moral? And I don't know how they do the testing. You can look at it yourself. People who, the more and more they study philosophy and ethics and all this, they actually become less moral individuals, if you can believe it. They might memorize everything from, Aristotelian moral philosophy to, Roman philosophy to, let's say, Islamic philosophy to post-enlightenment or pre-enlightenment moral ethical philosophy, or right now we're talking about postmodernism. In fact, all these fancy things. So they know in the ins and outs. They can prove to you everything about whether something is good or bad or moral or not moral. But their own life, they're the worst people possible. They end up, for example, I think one of the ways that they test them is about how much charity they give. A simple test of morality, right? Give charity. And they say that on average, somebody who is an expert in morality or philosophy and ethics, they give less on average than somebody who, let's say, hasn't even touched a book of philosophy or book on ethics. Just the information itself doesn't change individuals. And even our ulama, our teachers used to say this in Qum, whenever we would start to study philosophy, like the books of Allama Tabatabai, rahmatullah alayh. One of the first philosophy books that studies is his Bidayat al-Hikmah, right, which is literally like the introduction to philosophy or wisdom. And our teachers would say, look, we can teach this book, and you can learn it, you can memorize all these fancy terms, but that's not the point of these books. That's not the point of this text. The point of the text is that you should go through something called sayruratun nafs, that you should be going through the process of becoming. You should be traveling. You should be journeying towards Allah. That's what these, fancy things should be. Philosophy, metaphysics, irfan, sayr suluk, all these fancy things. If you're going to do this, you want to get on the path, no problem. You should change from it. Don't just memorize all these fancy terms and then, like that first group did, tell them back to people and say, look, I know all these fancy terms in philosophy and metaphysics. I can quote all these wonderful things to you. What's the point if you haven't changed? And this was even the problem with many in philosophy too, even in the Hawza. They study all these fancy terms, but if you look at whether they're involved in actually social, political movements, they're not. They memorize all this stuff, but they're the ones who are not going around and helping people out or actually fighting for a just cause. They're sitting there with their books, and the teachers would say, look, all the stuff that you're studying here is so that you can go out in the streets and fight the Zalimeen. That's the point of it. Not for you to sit at home and just study and memorize all day. But that's something for us to understand as well too. When we're studying and we're learning about the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, besides just memorizing a bunch of facts and history and things like that, we have to learn the process of becoming more like at least first the good people in the community. If we go past that, then we try to be like, let's say, the best people who live in the Islamic environments. If we go past that, then we go to the companions of the Ahlul Bayt. And then, of course, the whole idea is so that we become like the Ahlul Bayt, right? That's the whole point of it. Otherwise, why are we, what's the point of looking at all these hadith and the Quran and all this stuff? If we're not going to treat them like actual role models, we're wasting our time. Yes, it's going to take it's a lifetime's journey, no doubt. Don't think that you're going to become like the Imam or the companions of the Imam Husseini in Karbala overnight. No. God will judge us based on the circumstances that we have. And the circumstances that we have living in the West, we're living like in the most difficult of times, in the most difficult of eras, in the most difficult of places. Everybody is running around not knowing what the heck is true and what is false. They have no idea about right and wrong. Just do whatever your heart tells you, right? Follow your intuition and all this stuff, right? So there is no sense of right and wrong right now. So for us to stick with the teachings of the Quran and Ahlul Bayt and to actually implement it in our lives, when the whole world, the whole Western society is telling us otherwise, we're under that heat. We are going to become like gold, and we can decide whether we're going to take those teachings and become strong from it, or whether we'll melt under that pressure and become nothing. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So when it comes to education, besides that rote memorization, we should go beyond that and learn how to look at things from different angles too. The reason why these other groups that the Imam is mentioning here, the first group is just, Ahlul Dunya, that they just use the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt to get money, to earn a livelihood, that's it. And the second group is brittle and weak like glass. The reason is because they haven't had a proper intention, perhaps, on taking wisdom from the Ahlul Bayt, learning how to apply the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhimus salam. So when it's like this, what we need to do is, okay, since we're living in a society where we're being bombarded with different information from all places, even amongst our own speakers and scholars, then if we want to make ourselves stronger than glass, right? We want to be like gold, like Imam is saying. Then that may mean what we have to start doing is going beyond the surface level type of research. The minbar is not going to be enough. This program here, it's not going to be enough. There's only so much we can do on Thursday nights and whatever. That's not a proper Islamic education. Madrasa is not proper Islamic education. It's not. It's the basics that you need, but then from there you need to go beyond that. Whether it's reading books, following other lectures, asking questions, going beyond, understanding what other people are saying. Again, these other sort of controversial speakers. I know we've talked about this before. You have to know yourself. If you really want to understand how to, whether our orthodox traditional method is the right one, well, okay, if I can handle it, let me hear the other side, or, understand what they're saying, and then go back and see, is there a response to this or not? Again, it's a back and forth process. And you see what the Ahlul Bayt, when they were teaching, they do the same thing. Their teaching wasn't simply rote memorization. What they would do is they say, come, we'll give you the different perspectives of other individuals. We'll show you the weakness in their arguments and the strengths in their arguments, but then we will quench your thirst with the pure teachings of us, the Ahlul Bayt. So then you will know the strength of haqq versus the weakness of batil. If all we're going to hear is one side of it, then it's not going to be enough. And this is one of the reasons why we said, you know what? Let's go through the proofs of these progressive, liberal, existential speakers. Let's actually go through and see, is there any strength at all? And as we've been seeing through the past, month or 2 months or so, we've seen that the arguments are no different than glass. They're brittle, they're weak. We can see the weaknesses in them. And the minute we use the Quran, we use the Hadith, we use our intellect, we see how weak they are and how these arguments shatter and pale in comparison to the true teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhimu salatu wassalam. And we'll end with one other famous advice about a true Shia of the Ahlul Bayt, again from our Imam al-Baqir, alayhi salatu wassalam. He's reported to have said, "Murru shi'atuna biziyarati qabr al-Hussein alayhi salam." Command, order our Shias to perform the ziyarah to the qabr of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. Now, interestingly, in this hadith, we have a lot of hadith about the benefits of going to performing the ziyarah of Imam Hussein. Many of them use the language of just perform ziyarah, which means you can perform it from your home, on the rooftop, right, from far away. The Imam here is saying, go to the qabr of Imam Hussein. Going physically, going to Karbala has its value. Going to the Darih, going to that qabr has a specific value perhaps. فَإِنَّ إِيتَانُهُ يَزِيدُ فِي الرِّزْقِ. Because if you're able to really achieve it and understand and get to that qabr and understand what you're doing, then this will actually expand your rizq. وَيَمُدُّ فِي الْعُمْرِ. This will extend your life. وَيَدْفَعُ مَدَاعِفُ السَّوْءِ. And this will help you defend and build up your defenses against all the different evil that you may face. You see, when we talk about performing the ziyarah of Imam Hussein, or any of the Ahlul Bayt, but especially when we go to the Ahlul Bayt and Imam Hussein in Karbala, it's not there just as a spiritual vacation. It's the peak of our spiritual education. When we go to the masa'ib and the musibah of the Ahlul Bayt, it's, yes, we shed tears and we feel bad for that. But at some part of it needs to be spiritually educational for us as well too. And we think about what position were the Ahlul Bayt in that they could be so directly attacked and abused by the Muslims of that time. Why were they in this situation? Why is it that even their Shias that were there couldn't defend them and support them properly? Well, what's going on? And what does that mean for me right now and my Imam being in Ghaiba? Am I one of those so-called Muslims or so-called Shias like those in the past that just allowed the constant abuses and dhulm to take place to the Imams? Or what am I going to be like those Shias who were with the Imam 24/7, learning, benefiting, and eventually giving their life to defend their Imams? Which of the types of Shias do I want to be? So when we go for these ziyarat, yes, go, shed your tears and cry, recite poetry. This is all good. We should do it. But also, when you go and sit there and talk to the Imam, and yes, we do directly talk to the Imam. There's nothing wrong with that. And when you do directly talk to him and say, "Ya Imam, tell me, what do I need to do for you? How can I become a servant and a slave and a supporter and a fighter for your grandson Al-Mahdi? What do I need to do?" When we think about the musibah of our Imam, of the fifth Imam, we obviously know, according to historians, that he was present in Karbala. And according to historians, he was approximately 4 years old, meaning more than likely than not, he was around the same age as Bibi Sakina. But what's interesting is that we do have a decent amount of information about the dhulm that was done to Bibi Sakina, the difficulties that she went through, the abuse that she faced at the hands of people like Shimr. We have her statements and her words that she would say against the people of Kufa, for example. We have all of this. But in none of our books do we have anything from the fifth Imam, a young child who again was going to be the Imam when he got older, but we don't have anything from him about what took place. So all we can do is imagine what he may have been going through there. And all we can do is compare it to what Bibi Sakina might have been going through. We see Sakina, she's there in the tents, perhaps with the women, seeing her cousins and her uncles going out one by one. But no doubt Imam al-Baqir is watching his cousins lose their lives and give their lives one by one. Maybe perhaps the Imam is thinking, how come Akbar can go out? How come Qasim can go out? How come An and Muhammad, they can go out? How come all of these young children can go out? Why can't I go out? Why can't I go defend my my grandfather? Why can't I go defend the Ahlul Bayt? Perhaps the Imam was thinking this. Imagine Sakina, she can see and look at her father anytime in the tents, and she can speak with her father. But what about Imam al-Baqir? Imam al-Baqir must have been watching his own father laying down, bimar, on the bed, and wondering, what can I say? What can I do for my own father, watching him in this state? Maybe he saw the pain in his father's eyes when Imam Hussein comes to his tents to say his final wada, and Imam Zain al-Abidin is trying to get up and hold himself up and is asking Bibi Zainab for help to support himself when he tries to grab his sword, and he's stumbling around saying, Baba, how can I let you go out and fight the Yazidi forces while I'm still alive? How can a son watch his father go out like this? Can you imagine Imam al-Baqir watching all of this and saying, what can I do for my father and my grandfather? I see my own father stumbling around in this state. What can I do for him? When perhaps Imam al-Baqir sees Sakina holding the legs of Dhul Janah, stopping her father to go, he says, is there anything I can do to stop my own father from burning in the tents of the Ahlul Bayt? Can I do anything there? And now Imam al-Baqir is watching her, Bibi Zainab come in and pull out the body of the Imam, pull out the mattress of the Imam while the tents are burning there. Imagine the pain in Imam al-Baqir's eyes. Imagine the pain and tears in Imam al-Baqir's heart as he's watching all of this, as he watches his own father being whipped by Shimr over and over and over again. And they say that the most difficult thing that Imam al-Baqir went through, the one thing that we do have narrated, is towards when he's performing the ghusl of his father, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. They say that when the Imam began to perform the ghusl there, he let out a loud sigh and a loud cry, and the companions were saying, why are you crying and sighing like this? He said, I was there witnessing what would happen in Karbala. I saw the abuse my father took, but this is where I finally see all the marks and the scars that are on his body. And they said, look at his neck. All of these marks that are here are from the iron collar that was driven into the neck of my father. Look at the back. You see all of these marks on the back of my father. All of these marks are from the constant whips that he faced at the hands of Shimr's whip.
على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Ya Rab koi masooma zinda mein na tanha ho. Ya Rab koi masooma zinda mein na tanha ho. Ya Rab koi masooma zinda mein na tanha ho. Ya Rab koi masooma zinda mein na tanha ho. Ya Rab koi masooma zinda mein na tanha ho. Ya Rab koi masooma zinda mein na tanha ho. पाबंद ना हुआ है, ऐ पाबंद ना हुआ है, रोने में न पैरा हो. या रब कोई मासूमा जिंदा में न तन्हा हो. थी जिसको नींद आती शबीर के सीने पर, थी जिसको नींद आती शबीर के सीने पर. जिंदा दर जिंदा है, जिंदा दर जिंदा, उसके लिए कज़ा हो. या रब कोई मासूमा जिंदा में न तन्हा हो. या रब कोई मासूमा जिंदा زندانوں سے آتی تھی آواز اس حق نے کی، زندانوں سے آتی تھی آواز اس حق نے کی، جیسے کہ سنینا کو ہے، جیسے کہ سکینہ کو ہر زندان رو رہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، ٹکرائے نہ وہ کیوں سر زندہ کی دیواروں سے، ٹکرائے نہ وہ کیوں سر زندہ کی دیواروں سے، بھائی سے اور پھوپھی سے، ہائے بھائی سے اور پھوپھی سے، جس کو جدا کیا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، زندان میں نجفی یاد آئی سکینہ کی، زندان میں نجفی یاد آئی سکینہ کی، دل رو رو کہہ رہا ہے، دل رو رو کہہ رہا ہے، اب نہ اجالا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا، بر محمد و آل محمد، فاتحہ۔
السلام علیک یا رسول اللہ، السلام علیک یا امیر المؤمنین، السلام علیک یا فاطمۃ الزہراء سیدۃ النساء العالمین، السلام علیک یا حسن المجتبی، السلام علی الحسین وعلی علی ابن الحسین وعلی اولاد الحسین وعلی اصحاب الحسین جمیعاً ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ۔ السلام علیک یا مولا یا غریب الغرباء السلطان ابا الحسن یا علی ابن موسى الرضا، کن شفیعنا و شفیع والدینا فی یوم الجزاء ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ۔ السلام علیک یا مولانا یا صاحب الزمان، السلام علیک یا خلیفۃ الرحمن، السلام علیک یا شریک القرآن، السلام علیک یا امام الانس والجان، اجر اللہ تعالی فرجک وسہر اللہ مخرجک وظہورک ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ۔ اللہم کن لولیک الحجۃ ابن الحسن صلواتک علیہ وعلی آبائہ في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقاعدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين۔